The shoot is on again, and you know we've taken this from professional wrestling, the only true sport, where they're working and that's fake. When they're shooting, it's real, and occasionally a shoot happens. We named this the shoot, and Mark Crowley, of course, puts all of this together. This is a real gift for me. Steffan Tubbs is here. Last week we did the shoot with Mandy Connell, and looks like Lee Larson will do the shoot. And Mike Rosen has thought, yeah, sometime after the 4th of July. And I want to do a series with Denver radio personalities before this time in talk radio and radio in general just gets away. Steffan's here. Started out in the business how many years ago now?
32 plus.
First job?
First job was getting coffee in college.
Oh, yeah.
For I affectionately call him Fat Howard. Fat Howard, the GM. And it was while I was in school at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, and I wanted to get into the business. I kind of known what I wanted to do for a long, long time, and I thought, you know what, if you want to work and be an astronaut, why not start as a janitor at NASA kind of thing? And I keep telling my kids that over the years, and they've kind of bought onto it and started there. Then they said, hey, you know, you want to do some news on the weekend, and then Gulf War I happened. And then that kind of just got me into the career path through college.
Did you go to Gulf War I?
I did not. I did not. I was too young, you know, didn't have the connections or what have you. I was all set to go. Fast forward to 2003, I was booked and ready. I was going to go to Qatar for coverage there, but my wife at the time was 8 months pregnant, and you know I worked for ABC News at the time, and they said, you know, we've got another person we can send, and of course I'm glad because I was there for the birth of my second.
Pull it back together. You knew. You're one of those guys that actually knew you wanted to do this.
I really did. I'm not saying necessarily radio, but I was always that inquisitive, annoying kid on the block.
You still are.
I know I am. And I take pride in that, my man.
You should.
I really do. But I was always one to, I was reading the newspaper when I was 8 or 9 years old. I loved that. Probably the most influential person in my life, my late grandmother. She was a librarian for almost 40 years. So reading was a big deal. I mean, there's nobody that I know that is such a voracious reader as you, right? And so I knew that I wanted to maybe get into newspaper. I think my first letter to the editor, to the San Diego Union Tribune, was, I think, maybe when I was 11 or 12, which was awesome.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, cutting out, it's still in a scrapbook somewhere. But I knew I wanted to do that. And then in high school, I was the white kid that was bused into an inner city high school. So I went to San Diego High School right downtown, but they had this amazing broadcast program. And so my sophomore year in high school, they had a TV studio that was kind of like this, and we did our own little newscasts and stuff. And that was 10th grade. Then budget cuts, that program went away. Started doing print in high school, and then I just knew that I loved it. There's just something.
Sure.
There's just,
when it happens,
there's just something about this business that I'm proud to say, and I know you are as well, that we're radio guys. I love the TV, I love the print and writing for magazines and internet and all of that, but there's nothing like radio.
I've said that so many times. You get inoculated by the needle on the record player. When you drop your first needle being a disc jockey, or the first time somebody actually calls up and they're listening to you. They want you to play a song, or and you go, wow, this actually, and then that comes, and I've talked about it, that moment for me when I heard the voices that said, come on.
Yeah, or how about when you get your first, I listen to your show all the time, or I love you.
Yeah.
Because
or the other way
God
around.
knows it's the other way. I hate you.
And they don't walk up to go, how much I really hate your show.
No. Well, today, I mean, it's, this, the wall of hate, the wall of love, social media. Everybody now with a cell phone thinks they're an Edward R. Murrow and, Mike Royko, here's my opinion type thing. But also, too, it just has gotten us into an amazing space, I think. And, long live radio. You and I talk about this. I mean, we first met, man, in 1994. You still had the thick mustache and
hair.
You were just as annoying then as you are now. But truly, man, you have been my mentor. You've been my dear friend. You know stuff behind the scenes and likewise. But at the end of the day, it's always been about for you telling me, just the love of this business and the love of radio, and you've given me that, and we're not saying goodbye yet.
Oh.
But I just want to say that, you know, you have been such an inspiration to me. I've wanted to kill you half the time, but
I'm never thrown by that. You know,
no,
I'm not.
And I guess maybe that was too harsh. But how about if you had a lanyard on? No.
Never thrown by that either. that never troubled me.
Listen, you're a legend, and it has been just absolutely great to be able to take stuff, especially my transition from news to talk, because you and I had many long conversations, and I've taken your advice, and I love it.
This morning when we were getting ready to do the show, I was sitting with Jimmy Sengenberger's doing on the show, and every break he'd come out, and every break we'd talk. You know, I felt like, well, not Leo DeRocher, but not you know, like, but here, kid. You know, load the bat.
Right.
You know, that
line
kind
up
of
your
thing.
knuckles or whatever. But I mean, I hope you know, and I'm being serious. I hope you know that is, it's important. And not to get too corny, but I feel like people at the stage of where you are, and I know retirement, but you can't give it up, right? But to me as well, you know, to pass along some of the things. And I don't think radio is going to die, but I wonder also where that next generation of people like you and me are.
There's too many people in the last 18 months that have wiped their feet on this business.
Yep.
There's too many people in this business that literally spit on it. And I don't know what's going to happen. I've projected that the Senate will hold hearings on talk radio. There are companies that are going to be sued and are being sued. There are people that are on-air jobs that easily could lose those positions because of. But the old, and we've talked about it, Mandy Connell has sat here, and many old talk show hosts have sat here. The love of the business, you know, almost there's a sacredness that goes with this business, and it's being destroyed. And it's one of the reasons I want to hang around and see what we can do next. But there are some, I mentioned Jimmy, there's a couple of yourself, there's a couple of guys. Mandy was here. They have a heart and soul to do the job, and we'll see what happens next. But
there's nothing like this business. You know, you've done a lot of TV. I have as well, and television is great, and you know, video seemingly is always. You know, radio has consistently been. I'm sure through your career, certainly mine. It's like you're kind of the stepchild of the way people consume. At the end of the day, there is nothing more immediate, nothing more in breaking news. I mean, for me as a newsman, you know, I mean, God forbid there's a disaster in 10 minutes 2 miles away, radio's on it. Television, it's going to take a while. I'll never forget when I got my first absolutely only full-time job in television. I had basically a cup of coffee at a Fox affiliate in New York City. And the amount of layers you have to go through before you finally do your report and live shot. I mean, I knew it because I'd done it part-time, but to just see it, it's like being a radio guy, I want to do it. You know what? It's 8 hours until, you know, your package is going to air. But radio is so immediate. And then for us in a talk show format to say something, and not necessarily to me, I don't try to bait people, but to get that you know, immediate reaction, or people think about it and get phone calls and get their input, I love it.
I've said this before, that when you read the history of the New York Fire Department, they had fire horses that would pull the wagons, the fire trucks, the fire wagons to the fires. So it's American LaFrance and a couple other companies started making fire engines. So they have all of these horses that the fire department has held and used, and so what are we going to do with the horses? So they put them on garbage trucks and garbage wagons, and they were pulling the garbage wagons around New York. That was fine until they heard the bells and they could smell the smoke and the cinders. The horses took off. And the garbage guys are flying out the back, and the garbage is going, those horses are going to the fire. And there's a whole part of us that you want to go to the fire. As we do this show this morning, the results of the primaries are in, the Republicans, and it's a total rejection of conspiracy Republican crazy talk radio. There was a referendum in Colorado on the kind of insanity that's run talk radio, and it was rejected.
I even coming in here to do the shoot with you, the national folks are paying attention to what happened in Colorado. I'm happy to say that with the results from as we taped this last night, It went exactly the way I wanted it to go. It went exactly, to the person as far as who actually was successful in the primary. People that I personally endorsed and we as a program endorsed. But I think that we needed, to me, results like we've seen here in Colorado, because the insanity is not going to make a successful November.
3 things. One was the assembly that was held by the Republican Party was exactly what it was, a clown show. And then this idea that the nefarious communists were going to come in and buy commercials and destroy the entire primary. That was a fiasco. And the folks in Tina Peters lost her home county, Mesa. She lost it. So this is a total rejection of the conspiracy insanity of talk radio, the internet, whomever shows up. So that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Now see if they're smart enough, and they're not, to now let it go, and they won't. And then, of course, the commission or the committee hearings in D.C. And we have an opportunity in Colorado. We both are, conservative men, conservative leading. And I think to myself, will these people now sit down or just resign their jobs or whatever the hell it is they need to do? My answer is no, they won't.
Well, the interesting thing about how talk radio has played out since specifically, there's November 3rd of 2020, but I look at the most recent insanity is the reaction and continued reaction. It'll happen later today, it'll happen tomorrow, it'll probably happen next year. When you look at January 6th of 2021, and I have said from the beginning, they're accusing me of not being a patriot. I don't care.
Don't worry about that.
I don't worry about that. But what I find really interesting is the fact that people are still holding on to January 6th, and then if people like you and me are even going to say, wait a minute. I have said, Pete, from the beginning, people can go back to the podcast. If you want to know how I feel about January 6th, go back to the podcast on January 6th and listen to our live coverage. But one thing that just infuriates me is there are some people out there, and people can feel any way they want, but don't attack me for feeling the way I do. But I just want to make a point that guy with the horned helmet, the dude hanging off the rafters in the Senate chamber, somebody going into the Speaker of the House's office and putting their feet on the desk, the damage and destruction and all of that, that was not everyone there. That was not everyone there. But if that's today's conservative, count me out. They don't represent me.
But these are true believers. Remember, there's an interesting thing about the truth. The truth doesn't need belief. It doesn't. And the truth requires no belief. That's why religion has belief. Truth requires no belief. And we have this continuation of insanity that is predicated on simply belief. But we will see, as the man said, we will see what happens next. But the results of last night were very powerful. And frankly, I was slightly surprised. I didn't know what was going to happen, but it also led me to believe that the assembly process that they did that was absolute insanity was exactly that.
Right. It was, it was a bleep show. It was a clown show. The one thing that I've questioned is, and this has been such a great driver for talk radio, right? And I think it will continue, is coming up to the midterms, is there going to be this perceived, what's now a perception of this red wave, is that going to happen? And I believe it will, maybe not to the extent of a tidal wave, but I think that we're going to see that, especially with the current state of the idiot that's in the White House right now. But my fear has always been, all right, here comes from the East Coast, we get to the Midwest, we come to the Rocky Mountain region. Will that red wave circumvent the state of Colorado? Because if there's anybody that can screw something up, it's a Colorado GOP, a Colorado Republican Party. And I am hoping beyond hope that what we saw last night,
there it is,
will kind of predicate, I guess, what happens in November.
Well, this morning gives me hope. And they got rid of the lunatics. And they were rejected by GOP voters. They were not rejected by...
And maybe some independents, too.
Well,
maybe.
If they declared and crossed over.
Right.
But that could have been. But they got rid of... Tina Peters, as we speak, still says she won't rescind. She said it was stolen from her. What I'm thinking, okay, drop that needle on that record and play that again. When you came into the business, everybody's had ups and downs, me more than anybody else. And you come into talk radio, and you were like the news guy. You were the morning show anchor. You know, that was the chair. I always call it the Gus Merkus chair.
Amen.
You know, that was his chair.
Amen.
For
Rest in peace, a
KOA.
legend. Yep.
There was no better guy. I mean, he's one of the old legendary radio guys that raised me and taught me stuff. And you had that seat. Everybody goes through ups and downs, and now you come to talk radio. What's the difference?
Put it this way, I have never gone back and listened to, for an air check, as they say.
No.
I have never gone back and listened to maybe my first, maybe my first year, to be honest. But I've even had, and I don't take offense to this, there have been people over the last couple of years that say, you know what, when I first heard you, and I always say my show was born here at KNUS, February 5th, 2018. And I wanted to absolutely do this job, and I know I could, but yeah, those first, especially the first few days, weeks, months, I am so used to, in my mind, just, I've got my opinions, I've got my values, everybody does, but I am paid at the other place I call Devil Radio. You call Brand X.
Actually, K-House Brand X.
Okay, I'm paid at that place to just do as best I can right down the middle. And I think I did a great job, because I would get hate mail from the left, I'd get hate mail from the right, and I'm like, okay, I might be doing something right. Here, and you told me this from Jump Street, is you've got to take a stand. And I believed you from the beginning, but I've absolutely seen the truth in that, because first of all, and I'm a radio and news talk junkie. If I'm tuning into somebody and they're waffling and on the fence, I'm like, click, let me go somewhere else.
But we all look at the ratings, and we look at the demise. KOA is in a huge demise right now.
And it's sad to me.
Very sad.
It is.
Yeah, very sad.
I mean, when I got that job,
they zipped Mike Rosen.
And a lot.
Who said he's going to take the seat, and that'll be great.
But I mean, when I took that, when I was able to start, the first shift I had at KOA was in the spring of 1994, 1 a.m. to 9 a.m., $19,000 a year. I was so broke that I had to literally leave at 9:30, and I went across near Tivoli. I don't even know if you ever knew this. I went for at least a good 8 months. I'd leave KOA at 9 a.m. I was the morning editor. I'm making the sausage for Gus and Chris Fitzrandolph and Keith Weinman and then eventually Steve Kelly. But I was so broke that I went across and then did another like 6-hour shift selling concert and symphony tickets for the DCPA.
See, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But then you stick it out, and then for me in 1995 was Oklahoma City, and that sadly, that tragedy changed my whole entire course of my life, because at the end of that, and then covering the trials here in Denver, I got a job offer at ABC and then based in LA.
Was it Chris Olinger that brought you here? Or was it Lee?
Lee was the general manager. Chris Olinger, arguably the best PD that I've ever had. I want to say also the just with the recent cuts at iHeart, Greg Foster, the program director there. When I was canned at KOA, Greg was the first to consistently tell me, this is a huge mistake on the company's part, but please know that I have nothing to do with it. And I totally trusted him, and I knew that they had taken the power from him. So Olinger and Greg Foster, great PDs. But when I came, it was pretty much, it was Jerry Bell. I owe my career to Jerry Bell, because he got me out of Fresno. I was working in Fresno for about 18 months. I hated every minute of it, but I loved every minute of it, because that's where I learned so much.
We should get Jerry in here. Jerry,
he's awesome.
Oh,
the best.
You remember when we exposed Ted Haggard? It was like,
I do.
So JB goes down to Focus on the Family to do an interview. And I had jammed up with Focus on the Family in the past a couple of times. So he's coming back up from I-25, and he calls me. He said, they're hot. They're threatening to sue you, and and that kind of stuff. And I knew I had Mike Jones, who had been the male prostitute with Ted Haggard.
Very good man.
Great guy.
Absolutely.
We're still friends.
Yeah.
Still friends. So, like, about 20 minutes go by, and my phone rings again. It's Jerry. Said, never mind. they copped to it, that Haggard was who you said he was.
Here's a great little sidebar.
It's a JB story.
And here's a sidebar that brings you into it. You did Studio 12 for many years, and you came up to me one day in the KOA newsroom and basically said, "Hey," and I can't remember the details, but it was like, "I'm leaving this show that I've done for a long time. I think you'd be great at it." To this day, Dominic is just, he's just the greatest. And so I had a run of, thanks to you, doing Colorado Public Television for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And I loved that, right? Well, one of the most memorable episodes, I think it's still out there on the internet, is 1 hour, commercial-free, with Ted and Gail Haggard. Right with me. And I'm telling you, you've done this long, you'll always have been doing this longer than me, right? And I remember going, I cannot dance around this issue. And my God, his wife is there. And you know what? I to this day, I'm very happy with my performance, because I'm my own toughest critic. If I suck, I'm really hard on myself. But I handled that well. But that whole thing happened with Haggard because you opened up the door.
Well, the Haggards always reminded me of Gary Hart and his wife.
100%.
That she stood there and said, "Oh no," or in the darkest night, maybe Pat Nixon. And I wonder what Melania Trump feels, and I wonder, what these people really. We do know a little bit more about these people, but she was interesting, and I almost had like sad respect that you actually don't believe that your husband, who's proven now to have done these things, and it's then, Hillary Clinton, "I'm not to stand by your woman, man." Well, your husband is cheating on you with a woman a little bit older than your daughter.
Mm-hmm. What do those have in common? Every one of those things are great for talk radio.
Absolutely. And that's the secret, is to know when to hold them and when to fold them. And right now, like I said, it's talk radio is in free fall, and it doesn't seem to have any stabling forces. These national network people that endorse a lunatic movie and do all this. No, this nuts stuff that I'm watching happen. I'm going like, my God, if the old stalwarts were alive, what would they say to, and none of these guys are radio guys. Remember, they just bring them in, give them a gig. And one guy, Gorka claims that he worked for Trump. I guess he had a cup of coffee with Trump, according to what some people have told me. I don't know. Now he's a talk show host. You never read the scores. You never counted cars. You never did the news. You never got up in the middle of the night in a snowstorm. You never did. But now you're a talk show host. And that's troublesome. It's like you didn't go to medical school, but now you're a doctor. And we're doing a lot of that. And that kind of stuff is kind of like, please.
I still, though, I will take because to me, that is glass half full. Excuse me, half empty. I'm going to look at it as glass half full. That there are still people. I consider myself one of those in the business that we get it, and it's not going to die. I mean, just in 32 plus years of me doing this, and you have more experience than me, it seems like would you say maybe at least every year, if not maybe a couple times a year, radio is dying, it's not going to be around, and I don't buy that. Our audience may shrink in number, but the people that do realize that this is a valuable service, if you latch on to somebody that you enjoy hearing,
I think it's true.
I think it's not going to die.
I think it's true for music radio because of XM and Sirius. I think the FM side of music, somebody in this city is going to launch a hardcore, strong FM talker, but no, I mean, I think that no matter who you are, and we talked about this many times, you get about 35, 38 years old, music passes you by, you come to talk radio. Talk radio has not been that diminished. It's outscored itself. Music radio's been diminished. Evening news, I think if you added up the ratings on the 10 o'clock news across the board in Denver, you'd probably have an 8 or a 6 or something.
I mean, who's,
nobody.
I know there's people are still watching, but I mean, gone are the days, my God, KUSA used to pull a 50 share.
But they've self-inflicted that.
100%.
They become the politically correct outlet for Denver.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up, because this is, to me, vitally important. When you look at right here in Metro Denver, right, and what you can get with TV stations around the state, they're, your big boys, if you will, are in Denver. they try to,
Oh.
they try to, oh, we're just going to give you the facts, ma'am.
No, they don't.
The fact is, they're not, and they know it. I say all the time, listen, you can have your Narcan in your pocket, and how about just open up your show with, good evening. But just an example, good evening, we don't support Donald Trump, we don't like conservatives, and here's the news. I'd at least have the respect of that. At least with a talk show on radio.
You know.
At least you know. And see, I've thrown, if I may be a little egotistical, forgive me. But what I think that I have as part of a unique deal is I have a legitimate news background. And when I kind of peek behind the curtain and tell you the BS behind the scenes, there's not a lot of people that can go, he's lying or he's not telling the truth. And I love that mix of, I know how the sausage is made, I know what news people do, and now I can tell you my opinions about it. And I think that, I don't know, I think what we do in my program and my time slot is valuable because you know where I'm coming from, but I'm also still going to give you facts.
Well, as I said, the news business, newspapers are all but through. There's a couple that still hang on. The TV network guys have, like you pointed out, it really, talk radio can have a spine, but it can't tell lies. And what's happened is it's become the place where lies are told. And they are the polar opposite of the ridiculous things that we've talked about in television news networks. Things will emerge. I mean, history teaches us that something will come from this. I don't know what it is, and I want to hang around long enough to see it. So, are there any rules now that that used to be, or things that you at once were and now no longer are? We're in free form. You're not a kid anymore. What do you want? I used to always call it, I just want to cross the finish line. I realize the finish line just keeps moving out ahead of you.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you chase it, I love it. I think that there's never been in my career, maybe my life, that right now we're in such a position that I think we are longing, we need facts. We need the truth. And not just a portion of the truth. You need everything. And I know you and I differ a little bit on the January 6th Commission. We do. And I hope that you respect me enough to at least understand where I'm coming from, because I feel that way about you. But I want to know everything. If we're only getting just a little bit, how about, with the January 6th Commission, for example, how about having some witnesses, if you will, under oath that aren't exactly selected by the Liz Cheneys of the world.
But remember something. They invited the Republicans to be on that committee, and they said no.
Well, there are two of them.
Yes, there are, and that's my point. Others were afraid of Donald Trump. Last night in Colorado, people no longer afraid of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
And it's like Nancy Pelosi was in charge of security. No, she wasn't. That's another lie that's being told. They offered these people, you want to be on this committee? The difference between Watergate and what we're watching now, the Republican Party was decent in Watergate and got rid of Nixon. The Republican Party now lives in fear. But last night, if any of you learned a lesson, stand up, be counted, tell the truth. The truth doesn't need a belief system. The truth stands alone.
Would you, though, agree? Maybe you won't. No. The goal of this January 6th Commission is not to oust a seated president. The goal, to me, is they are trying to ensure that Donald Trump will not get a nomination and that he will never, ever be reelected to the office of president. Isn't that the ultimate goal? And if it's not, what is?
Well, the Watergate Commission was about the sitting president of the United States.
Right.
About what he was doing. The other part of it is we will know. I mean, I don't know. Liz Cheney clearly has a Jones on Donald Trump. The Democrats clearly Jones on Donald Trump.
Everybody on that panel does.
But the truth doesn't need belief. And you're talking about what about this and what about that? They could have been on the committee. They could have been on the commission. They could have done these things. Donald Trump said he'd like to appear. I'm sure Liz would really accommodate you anytime you wanted to show up. And the other part of it too, and it's been the idiocy that I've watched now, this thing called your truth, her truth, his truth. There is only truth, and it doesn't need a belief. It just is the truth.
You actually convinced me of that earlier this year. I think because I would listen to you and I'd go, okay, I agree with this. I agree with this. I don't agree with that, which is the nature of talk radio. Sure. But I do agree that the whole my truth crap. Come on.
Come on. Steffan Tubbs, everybody, every afternoon, Monday, as they say, M through F.
M through F.
M through F.
3-7 PMT. 3 to 7 Mountain Time.
A good friend.
I love you, brother. And we miss you around here at the Radio Ranch.
Watch, see what happens next. The man's got a stick. See you next time on The Shoot. Thanks to Mark Crowley. Hi, Peter Boyles, former talk show host on 710 KNUS, now the Lion in Winter in repose, and I get to do this wonderful show. We do it every week. We've entitled it The Shoot, taking from professional wrestling where a work is fake and a shoot is real, and we've done some great shoots. Steffan Tubbs, and I tell you what, they pulled a joke on me coming in here this morning that was so slick. Steph and I go back 1,000 years, but between Steffan and the man who makes everything happen, Mark Crowley, they had me believing that Steffan was not going to show up because it was at a dentist appointment. Crowley said, you know, I had a bad tooth yesterday. I'm pulling what's left of my hair out. And then down the hallway comes Steffan Tubbs. Thank you, brother.
Hey, it's great to see you, man.
Great trick. Really well done.
Thank you very much.
The state of the state, as they say, the state of the union, the state of talk radio.
Oh, it's f***ed up.
We'll let that go.
We got you. No, we got you.